Did you know that as much as 36% of people out there struggle with foot pain? That's an absolutely staggering figure, and it's kind of mind-blowing to think that in this day and age, there are so many people suffering with chronic problems like plantar fasciitis, heel pain, Achilles tendonitis, bunions, corns, and Morton's neuroma. Now, over the course of the last year, I had the opportunity to sit down and chat with various experts on the subjects of feet and chronic foot problems. And what I wanted to do with this video was synthesize the information from all of those conversations to help give clarity to anyone out there who's suffering. Clarity not just about the cause of these problems, which according to these experts, many of these issues have a common origin, but also what you can do to help yourself. Let's get into this.
I personally believe that a lot of the foot problems in modern society is because of modern footwear. And the reason why I take that approach is because I look at the foot from a sensory perspective, not a biomechanical perspective. And what we're actually taught in podiatry school is foot function from a biomechanical perspective. That means, supination, pronation, high arches, low arches, flexion of the ankle, right? So it's very mechanical based, and the human body is not just a bag of bones that is like a robot of joints moving, right? It is to some degree, but then you have this fascinatingly complex nervous system or computer that is running that robot in a sense, and what influences and shapes and kind of defies the movements of our body is sensory stimulation, sensory processing, the perception of ourself, our breath. Do we connect to our breath? What's our stress level? How are we sleeping? Are we in fight or flight? Do we feel the texture under our feet? So it's all very sensory driven. And I feel that shoes, modern shoes, cushioned shoes, disconnects us from the sensory perception of our feet and the ground. And if you think of a baby learning to stand and to walk and just really connect to their body in space, it's all based around feeling themselves and feeling the external environment. And a lot of that's based off of the ground, right? So connecting to the ground. So as they start to feel like, okay, when I feel the ground, I feel safe. This is my base, right? My feet are on the ground. I feel safe. Okay, now I can start to lift my body up and stand. Okay, and as I'm learning to stand, they connect that foot stimulation to really posture, gravity, safety, and then movement. We lose that in shoes.
You have more nerve endings in the soles of your feet than anywhere but your fingertips and your lips. That's to feel things, so that on the best case scenario, your brain is getting feedback about what you're stepping on or stepping in to control your body, starting by moving those bones and joints of your feet. Worst case scenario is reflexes. So some information goes from your feet to the base of your spine right back down. So if you step on a bee, your brain doesn't need to think about it. There's a reflex that makes you recoil off of it by lifting at your hip. Well, with all this cushioning, you can't feel anything. So you've just made your feet numb, which means that they're dumb. So you're not as responsive, you're not as reactive, because you're not getting the feedback either at all or fast enough. And this is going to sound ironic, but because your brain is looking for that information, research shows that you will often land harder because if you have cushioning in your shoes, because your brain is trying to get some information.
No, it's exactly the same. It's the reason why dentists tell you not to eat after you've had lidocaine, because you can bite down so hard that you would cause damage because of the lack of sensation. I'm very familiar with this.
Holy smokes, that just gave me goosebumps just thinking about what you could do to yourself.
Exactly the same
It's the same idea.
When you add cushioning, first of all, the more cushioning you add, the further away from the ground you get, the less sensory input you get. But also, what people don't understand, and it seems counterintuitive, the more cushioning you have, the harder you hit. Like when you jump and land in sand, right? If you're jumping off a table and you're landing on sand, you're going to stiffen your legs so you don't collapse down into the sand, right? And if that were concrete, you're going to flex your ankles, your knees, and your hips. You're going to make yourself really spring-like because the surface is really stiff. And so if you're landing on a stiff surface, you got to make your leg compliant.
Yes.
And if you land on a really soft surface, you have to make your leg stiff.
Cushioning doesn't cushion even if you use it well, for a couple of reasons. One is that again, just the impact forces are mediated by your brain. But the other is that cushioning is basically tuned to a particular weight and a particular speed. So if you're not moving at the right speed and weigh the right amount, the cushioning doesn't do what it's supposed to do anyway. Also, having a flared sole, that changes the biomechanics of how you interact with the ground and puts additional torque on your ankles and your knees and your hips and your back. Oh, I forgot the easy one. Elevated heel. When you lift your heel up even just a couple of millimeters, it changes your center of mass, moves your center of mass forward just a tiny bit, and you need to adjust either with your knees, your hips, or your back. And so, and your head, all of it. Yeah. So, so let's see. Have I found anything in this shoe that is good? Oh, the laces, pretty good. Pretty good.
Wait, so let me sum up, Stephen, and see if I did a good job here. So we have a narrow toe box that doesn't allow the foot to spread and do what it's designed to do.
Well, and related to that, when you squeeze your toes together, you can't actually engage your arch, your longitudinal arch. There's three arches in the foot, but the one we think of is the longitudinal arch. So you can't really engage your arch if you can't spread and flex your first toe. That's where most of the power in your foot is coming from. And if you squeeze your toes together, that's all gone.
So we have a narrow toe box that prevents the big toe from working. We have this heavy cushioning or foam padding on the bottom, which I love what you said there. It dumbs down the foot by lessening the sensory information, the sensory input.
Well, let me highlight that for a sec, because what quote good cushioning does, your feet have mechanoreceptors. So basically they're feeling, changes, physical changes. When you have cushioning, it spreads that force out over a bigger surface area, so your feet don't feel it as much or at all. But the force is still there. It just bypasses your ability to feel it in your feet and goes straight into your ankles, your knees, your hip, and your back.
The skin in the bottom of the feet, like the skin on the palm of our hands, has very unique nerves. And these nerves are sensitive to different stimulation. Texture is one, which I'll speak about in a moment. Pressure, vibration is another one. Skin stretch. So very specific stimulation that we actually experience every time your foot strikes the ground. So your foot's on the ground or you're walking on various terrain, the nerves in the feet need to be able to sense that, to feel it, right? To feel the irregular edges, or to feel the vibration of impact forces. So impact forces is actually vibration, and that's sensed by these nerves in your feet. So part of my master's was really looking at these nerves and studying them and seeing, okay, how do we bring in vibration? Okay, take cushion out of your shoes. If you have cushion in your shoes, the cushion absorbs the vibration, but we need vibration to tell your brain how hard the surface is, how hard you're striking the ground, the acceleration rates to maintain balance. So it's shaping everything, right?
When you put a cushion on somebody's heel in a shoe, it promotes you landing on your heel. And I have some great video that shows a Kenyan runner, the very first time they're running, first barefoot, and they land on the ball of their foot, just barely, just a mild forefoot strike. You put them in a pair of shoes, and the first thing they do is they go to their heel, and they can stride out more because it's comfortable.
Meaning the stride gets longer as you put in that.
Stride tends to get longer, and you. So really, for a given cadence, think about that. You actually get more speed.
Yes.
The thing is, you pay for it with an impact.
Once they added the wedge of heel, or the wedged heel, everything else followed. Because like with a wedged heel, you naturally end up landing on your heel. It's very few people do anything other, because basically the heel gets in the way and you have to end up hitting it. Your heel's a ball is unstable. So then they had to try to build in motion control, but there's no amount of cushioning that's going to impact or affect the amount of force that you're putting on the ground. I weigh 148 pounds. When I hit the ground jogging, I'm hitting the ground with 500 pounds of force. When I hit the ground when I'm sprinting, I'm hitting the ground with 800 pounds of force. There's no foam that's going to mitigate that. And then again, by the time your foot comes down, you're in that weak position, trying to be strong. That puts strain on your plantar fascia. I mean, there's like literally from the just having that padding under the heel, almost every other problem was discovered and then made worse with the solutions that don't solve things. Here's why modern athletic shoes look the way they do. Way back when, 50 years ago or so, Bill Bowerman, the founder of Nike, was sharing a building with some sports podiatrists, or maybe orthopedic podiatrists, I can never remember. And he said, I'm getting these new runners who are getting Achilles tendonitis. What do you guys recommend? And the doctor said, oh, well, clearly they've been wearing higher heeled dress shoes, so their Achilles have shortened. And so you want to make a higher heeled running shoe, like with a wedge of foam or something, to accommodate the Achilles. And so that's what Bowerman did. And my favorite part of this story, there's two. The first is that when he did this, Arthur Lydiard, who was one of the most successful running coaches in history, more world champions and Olympic champions than anyone else, coming out of New Zealand, a country with, this many people, and way more sheep than people. And so Lydiard says to Bowerman, that design of yours with the wedged heel, like I'm showing, that's going to kill people. And Bowerman's response was ostensibly, yeah, I'm selling a shitload of them. The thing I can tell you about the footwear industry is when something starts to catch on, everybody else starts getting ready to copy it because they're terrified they'll never sell another product. So like when the whole barefoot movement came in 2009, 2010, the shoe companies spent the first year telling you that if you ran barefoot or got out of their shoes, you'd step on hypodermic needles, you'd get Ebola, your kids wouldn't get into college, your car wouldn't start. I mean, you name it. They were just making stuff up because they were terrified that they would never sell another shoe. Well, okay, so that Lydiard story is part one that was fascinating. But here, cut to the chase 30 years later. A guy that I know that I've designed some shoes with, one of them that's up there, he worked directly with Bowerman for like 30 years. And so decades after the guys gave Bowerman the idea for the elevated heel padded motion control shoe, my friend says to them, your idea has become ubiquitous. Every modern athletic shoe is using that wedged heel thing. What do you think about that? And the doctor said, this is at a track meet, and the doctor said, yeah, that was the biggest mistake we ever made.
Whoa.
He said everything we were doing was about prosthetics and orthotics, and so we saw everything as having a prosthetic orthotic solution, but we had no evidence for the Achilles thing or what this adding the cushioning would do. And there's research that shows that the cushioning causes problems. But let's break this down. Let's take a look at the shoe. Again, pointy toe box, no idea why. That one's a mystery to me. And if your foot is shaped like that, guess what? It's not supposed to be. You don't do push-ups with your fingers squeezed together. You do push-ups with your fingers spread apart. That's better for balance, agility, or balance and strength production. Same thing with your feet. Your feet have a quarter of the bones and joints of your entire body. Bones and joints are made to move. If you don't let them move, all the tissues around them get weak. So here's a typical shoe. That's not even where your foot bends. So it's bending in the wrong place. And then it doesn't bend anywhere else. It doesn't even bend. I can't even get it to bend from the toe up where your toe is actually bend. Yeah. So that's a problem. Arch support. A lot of people think they need arch support, whether they have high arches or low arches, which is a weird thing. There's no other situation where I can think of the same solution is presented to people at either end of the spectrum. Regardless, arch support weakens your feet because it's supporting your arch. It's not letting your arch function properly. And the reason it's even in there is because when you have this high-heeled shoe, by the time your foot hits the ground, your foot is fully extended. Instead of being engaged, you have an arch in the bones of your foot. Doesn't matter if it's high or low. It's functionally the same. It supports you if you let it work. But when you land on your heel, by the time your foot comes down, it can't work properly. But leave that alone. Put your arm in a cast, 8 weeks later, it comes out weaker. Put your arch support in your shoes, 8 weeks later, your feet are up to 17% weaker. This is from research from Katrina Protopopoulos.
What was the percentage there?
Up to 17% in 12 weeks. So even if you run with great form, but you're in a shoe with a big, thick heel, when if you land on your midfoot and then your heel comes down to the ground, it can't come down all the way. So you're not using your Achilles. Right. Yeah. So you're not using your Achilles, which is a natural spring. It's like the best spring ever made. And you're not getting the full use of that spring for what is literally free recoil, free energy. So you're getting in the way of what would make running easier when you have an elevated heel.
And then we should also mention that the Achilles is directly connected to the arch structure via the plantar fascia and that entire spring ligament system. That's all wired to work together.
Yeah. So, your muscles, ligaments, and tendons are the best springs and shock absorbers and joint protectors you can ever find. And the modern athletic shoe just gets in the way of using any of them. Dr. Irene Davis had a lab at Harvard. She now moved down to University of Southern Florida. And the first thing she does with any athlete who comes into her lab with some injury is get them out of their regular shoes and into ours, and or into something minimalist, usually ours. Her line is, in the 60s and the early 70s, we were playing basketball in Chuck Taylors. We were running in thin-soled running shoes, that's all there were, and we weren't seeing the number of injuries, the severity of injuries, or the type of injuries that we're seeing now. In fact, if you look in PubMed, the repository of all scientific research, and you look up information about the cause, the cure, and the treatment of running injuries prior to about 1972, you won't find anything. It just wasn't happening.
I believe that the closer we are to the way that we were adapted to move, then the lower our risk for injury. And if you think about that in terms of footwear, for example, our feet were meant to spread, right? You need to have spread in the ball of your foot. Our feet should be shaped like trapezoids and not like diamonds, right? Where the wider part is at the ball of the foot. And yet we take our feet, we squeeze them into shoes that are not shaped like our feet. And women are really the biggest group that has this problem because they love high heels and pointed toes. And so that's one issue. So we've got shoes that don't fit the shape of our foot. And then we have shoes that we have, as I said, we've got 10 muscles and 4 layers just on the undersurface of the foot. And we have muscles on the top of the foot, the sides of the foot, and those muscles are there for us to be able to function without the help of anything, no footwear at all. I mean, we have spent the vast majority, 99.999% of our evolutionary history, barefoot or in very, very minimal shoes. I love to wear high heels. I know they're terrible for me and I don't wear them very often. I don't want to tell women don't ever wear them. We all wear them for probably 2 hours at the wedding or wherever we're wearing them to, and we take them off because they're uncomfortable, right? Don't wear them all the time. It's just like, you can sit in that Barco lounger if you want to, but don't sit in it all the time. You can sit in a chair, but make sure you get up and you walk around. It's the same way I feel about high heels with women, because if you just tell me you can never wear high heels, you might not even get any compliance. So I say, wear them, judiciously. Wear them when you want to really dress up. They're going to hurt your feet. They're not comfortable. When someone says I got a comfortable high heel, it's usually not going to be a really high heel because it puts all the pressure on the mechanics, all the pressure on the ball of the foot. So yes, if you're wearing those kind of shoes all the time, your foot is going to shape to it. I had an x-ray. It was really a good picture of somebody in a pair of shoes that were tight and someone that was in a pair of shoes that were minimal. And you see all of the space between the toes in the minimal shoe, and the foot is crunched up. The toes are kind of angled in towards each other. You can see it on an x-ray.
The dental profession has done a phenomenal job educating the general public that, hey, if you want to keep your teeth and your gums and maintain them for a lifetime, you need to do these 2 very basic things a few times a day, every day for the rest of your life. Yeah. And other professions have not done as good of a job. We can say that if Dr. Irene Davis is doing this down in her clinic, getting people into your shoes is like step 1. You're saying that getting people into their foot into a natural position and then rinse and repeat every time you take a step, whether you're walking or running, it leads to a more normal outcome. That just makes so much sense.
To bring in sensory stimulation of the feet and to be barefoot, that actually helps people with circulation issues, with neuropathy, with diabetes, with ulcer prevention. So it's huge.
If a person has spent their life in traditional shoes, as most people in Western society have, and they're interested in going in the direction of allowing their foot to be in a more natural position. So oftentimes in the clinic, if we're transitioning somebody like this, we will kind of ease them into it as we would with like a standing workstation. How do you recommend that people get, go ahead.
Well, so when you would ease them into it, what would that look like?
So if I was easing somebody who had spent, say, 30 years sitting at a desk into a standing workstation, I would have them start off with, say, 5 minutes out of every hour, and they would set a timer, and they would stand for that 5 minutes, and then they would go back into the position that they're accustomed to being in. Or say if I'm starting somebody with toe spreaders, which is one of the things that I love to do with people with dysfunctional feet. Hey, let's make some space in there, which is exactly what your shoes allow them to do. But I don't start them off wearing the toe spacers 24 hours, all day in the very beginning, because they would be exceedingly uncomfortable and less likely to wear them again. So how do you recommend that people kind of ease it?
So the big shoe companies back in 2010, when they thought this whole barefoot thing was going to, put them out of business, a couple of companies came up with what they called transition shoes. If you're going from something with a big heel, you want to go a little lower, a little lower, a little lower. Complete nonsense. So what you want to do is exactly what you said. You want to go cold turkey, or hot turkey in this case, because you're not quitting something, whichever it would be. It's post-Thanksgiving, whatever kind of turkey you have. Tofurkey, I don't care. So you want to do this exact same thing. You want to either be barefoot or in shoes like ours and just do a little bit. If you're just walking, walk for half an hour. See how you feel the next day. If you feel like you're a little sore, like you just did a little too much at the gym, wait till you're not sore, go back and do it again until you can just do whatever that little bit of time is enjoyably. Then just add like 10 seconds every next time. And similarly, if you're running 5 days a week, you'll eventually get to the point where maybe one of those runs you do in bare feet or shoes like ours, and then you slowly build it up. So it's a titration process.
Sure.
I can't give a specific thing, a specific time, because that depends on you and how your brain works and what, how neuroplastic you are and how quickly you make new neural pathways to learn new movement patterns. And here's a quote from Irene, backing up to your previous question about what percentage of foot problems are caused by footwear. Her line is, if we just got kids wearing shoes like Zero Shoes, in 20 years, we wouldn't be treating adults for the billions of dollars of problems they currently have.
If you're ready to make the switch towards a more minimalist shoe, but you're not sure where to start, check the description down below. I'm going to put links down there for some of my favorite barefoot shoe options. Beyond that, I just want to thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button before you head out of here, and I'll see you next time.